Welcome to part 2 of our Free Play Arcade podcast featuring Ben Gold of, wow, I don't even know what you're most famous for. That's incredible, I guess. We got talked about that in part 1. We have Corey here, as always, the CEO of Free Play
Still
Arcade.
here, yeah.
Me, Chris Delp, I'm the community liaison. It's not important. Ben Gold's here. I am so nerding out, so hit like and subscribe because you like these videos and you want to keep encouraging me to nerd out this hard. But here we go. I have something for you. Okay, so I promised in part 1 that I would show you the bounty board. So when the community group was created, when I was not an employee of Free Play, The Witcher 3 was my most favorite game that was not an arcade game at the time. And that's come back into vogue here recently, but this was the bounty board. So I had one of my artist friends, and I believe this was Josh Featherstone that made the bounty board for me. It
Also now an employee of Free Play.
It may have been Sarah, though, because Sarah was my original, like, hey, set this up in Photoshop. And this more value than gold bounty here that I'll give the picture to Matt as well. But it was get second place in Berserk because somebody came into our arcade, and the first score was clearly glitched out. Like 10 times the world record holder. I don't know what was happening with that first score.
That was me. No.
Right. Yeah. Casually getting billions of points on Berserk. I don't know what was happening there. But the second score was Ben. It just Ben. And it was like a score that I could not achieve at all. I tried because I saw a score in Dallas that was Ben. Now, it wasn't you.
It's true. We all thought it was. Though.
But
That's a funny story because, yeah, we all talked about it and we were like,
well, in the
was
same
that Ben Gold?
Yeah, in the same day, somebody came in and said a Joust high score that I couldn't reach and a Berserk high score that I couldn't reach and put in the initials BEN. And so that was my call out to you. I never mentioned like what it was. The name of the bounty is just more value than gold. But it was because, I just wanted to meet Ben Gold. Like that was it.
How funny.
Yeah.
We assumed he actually was just telling me that he went to Free Play Richardson recently. Is that right?
In November.
Uh-huh.
after we met in October, and I was with my son, and I said, let's go just to the arcade for fun.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't call you or anything. I didn't want to make a big deal, so I just said, let's just see what it's like. And we hung out there. It was fun. And the only thing was there was a game going on. And I wanted to watch it, and you guys didn't have any. You don't have any TV screens in the.
We'll put the Cowboy game on the projector. Yeah,
we'll
put
Cowboys up playoffs.
The playoffs made it.
The Olympics we'll get on there, but yeah.
Right.
To be honest, we're working on that. We're trying to get more.
Olympics is a good excuse to have a track and field competition. So
no, the Olympics is the best because no one actually cares. But if like the U.S. surprisingly does well, the entire place has a ton of fun and drinks a ton of alcohol.
Right.
It's so awesome. I love the Olympics. But all right, so we're back. We just got past That's Incredible. Mm-hmm. And we're moving on to the bus tour with Walter Day. So I guess kind of set that up. How did that even happen? Because to me, it sounds so crazy.
Well, let me kind of share with you the kind of what happened between That's Incredible and the bus tour.
Okay.
So after That's Incredible, it was like, wow, I was famous again and did a lot of interviews and came to Ottumwa. There was in March of 83, there was this thought that there was going to be a video game circus. And
what?
Oh, yeah.
I'm in.
So there was this guy who was
Are you going to be doing a trapeze act while playing Stargate?
Subscribe. I'm in. Sounds awesome.
Well, it was, if you watch the movie Chasing
Tigers
Ghosts,
chasing you while you're playing the game.
Zookeeper.
Okay.
Right.
Well, if you ever see the movie Chasing Ghosts, they do a pretty good job of explaining it. But it was something that I assumed I'd be a part of, invited, because I always figured that you want the best players there. But I guess the guy who organized it was kind of an asshole, and I was a very outspoken person. So if I thought there was an issue, I spoke very frankly. If I thought someone was cheating, I'd just call him a cheater.
That's awesome.
And this guy didn't like the fact that I had pointed out some things that I was a little uncomfortable with the structure. And evidently it pissed him off enough that he didn't want me on the team. Okay. Which was fine because I ended up, spending the summer with, basically with Eric Ginner and Todd Walker. Okay, and I stayed with them for like a month in California. We almost went to the US Festival. We drove all the way from San Jose, and our car broke down in Bakersfield, California. We were stuck there for a week. Okay, so literally like a week of us just going to a hotel and waiting for our car to get fixed. And then finally, I was called by this cable TV show that they wanted to do a pilot, and I have that on my YouTube channel where
I watched it.
The video game challenge, and what they agreed to is that they would fly me back to Dallas. So I said, "Oh, great! I'll get a free trip back to Dallas.
You'll get out of here."
And I played against Eric, and the funny thing was, I was peaking again at Millipede. I had just like the week before set a world record of 4 million, and so Eric wasn't in his peak form, so it was not that difficult to beat him that time.
Right.
And I went back to Dallas, and I was like, okay, so I had spent the first part of the summer 6 weeks in California. And I'm like, I met all the people at Atari. Matter of fact, if you look at like Crystal Castles, Marble Madness, I met the designers. And when you look at if you were to reset them, they have like lots of high scores. And you'll see Ben, and that's me.
Yeah,
all
nice.
of those.
Awesome.
Yeah, we definitely have it at Richardson.
And I have to double check
games,
So I have to check Marble Madness. I know Franz Lanzinger. He was the guy who did Crystal Castles. Because that's what if you know that the Millipede, Centipede, all those, the top 3 scores are real. The bottom 5 or 6, those are all Atari designers.
Right.
Those they're the initials. So I get back
Is
to
Dr.
that.
J Dr. J?
What?
Is Dr. J Dr. J? Is it Julius Erving? Is that who that's supposed to be?
I
That's the
don't think
default
so.
high score for Defender is Dr. J. And you probably blow past this in the first save, so you don't know.
unlikely.
But
I don't know on Williams who it is.
Yeah.
I knew that.
We'll have to ask Eugene about it.
Yeah, you should ask Eugene. It's but that would actually be a very good question. So the thing was, I go back to Dallas, and I'm like, okay, I was about to be done with video games, and then Billy calls me up and says, "Hey Ben, this video game circus thing kind of crashed, pretty bad, and so we're heading back to Ottumwa. And why don't you come join us for the video game U.S. national video game team? We're going to travel by car through the country." God. And I have no idea how he convinced me or how he convinced my parents to let me get into, fly to Ottumwa. And we started driving, around the country.
Well, and it's only something you can do as a teenager, like, because you just have that much time. You're like, okay, let's try. So the story that I read, there was like an RV that kept breaking down. But inside the RV, y'all had games?
Yes.
That you were practicing like as it drove, and it was like powered off of some sort of generator or something?
It was like we had games inside, and the idea was that the bus itself would be part of the tourist attraction. It kept breaking down, and finally we just rented a car.
Fair enough.
And it was just I'll say this, that Billy has this photographic memory. I mean, he remembers everything. And we always go back, because whenever we meet, we argue about what actually happened on that trip. So, for example, Billy was always good with the ladies. I was the nerd, and there was this one time where Walter every night had to do meditation.
Right.
So even back then, he would do like an hour, 2 hours. Imagine him doing 2 hours meditation, leaving 5 teenage guys.
So he's like in charge, but he's like 34 or whatever.
Yeah.
And y'all are all like 16 to 18. And he's like, I have to do something. Y'all have fun for an hour or two.
Yeah, exactly.
And y'all just go.
I mean, think about it today of a 34-year-old man with 5 teenagers traveling the country, all of the implications. Number one, how people would look at that.
Well,
and you're driving to like every little city, right? Every
Yeah.
city that has a TV station. Is that what's causing like you to pick these cities or Walter?
I have no idea. Walter was.
I mean, whatever arcade would pay some money.
Media
maybe?
Markets number 25 through 116. Holy cow!
It was, and it's all a blur for me. I mean, Billy remembers. Okay, we were in Dayton. We were here in Michigan. We were here. I just remember that there were a couple of crazy moments. The story that we always talk about is the fact that we went to this diner, and there was this really, really cute waitress, right? And so one time, I mean, we're flirting. I think they were probably like, well, these guys are from out of town, and I remember that for whatever reason, they let us in their car, right? And we're and I remember
the waitresses.
Yeah, there's like two waitresses, and there are like four of us. I forget if it was 4 or 5, but it was like we pop in the car, and I look, and I asked a question, and Billy pushed me really hard. My head hits the windshield. The entire front windshield cracks.
That is really hard if you can crack a windshield.
Oh yeah.
It was different back then.
But it was back then it didn't take as much force. And I look at that, and basically Billy always says to me, well his way of remembering was, God, Ben, you just cracked your windshield. And I'm like, well, I think I had some help in doing that. But we had these moments which were just, teenage. So it wasn't really the playing of the video games I remember. It was always just everything that was outside of that.
So did y'all have uniforms or jumpsuits or T-shirts? Or...
We had T-shirts.
Okay, and y'all...
We were this is typical Walter Day.
Right.
The U.S. national video game team, which is 5 T-shirts, okay, and a broken down bus, and then a rented car. Traveling
making appearances.
Appearances.
Anyone who would have y'all.
I mean, I told him, I said, I feel like the 1860 baseball players. I mean, that's basically what it was.
And when did you leave? Like, was it 83? That was the end of your association with the U.S. national video game team? Or?
I don't know what I mean, it's like that. The U.S. They traveled. We went all the way to Seattle. We went down to Southern California. Then they drove actually back through Dallas, dropped me off.
Nice.
And then I think then 2 or 3 times later on, I did do a couple things in the end of 83, which is there's a guy named Steve Harris. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Just the name.
So Steve Harris was one of the rare birds that was both a brilliant video game player, and he also started EGM, Electronics Game Monthly.
Okay, this is exactly where I was going. This is why I asked. Yes.
What?
So that's how I know the United States National Video Game Team was. I was a subscriber to EGM.
So for the next 10 years, they're going to appear in EGM as the U.S. National Video Game Team.
And it's funny because Steve Harris he was one of the it was interesting because he was business minded. Mm-hmm. So I was not business minded. For whatever reason, maybe there was something in my brain that was not wired for it. So every time he proposed something, like he had this idea. Okay, talk about a really stupid idea. We went to the manufacturers in 1983 and we said, we're video game players. We went to these shows. We said, we'd like to do some give you some feedback and do evaluation. He wanted to create a company where players actually gave feedback to the manufacturers about their game. Mm-hmm. And the manufacturers in 1983 told us, why should we listen to you?
They were like, how fast do y'all die? Because that's all we care about. Next quarter, please. Right.
They said, we don't care what you think. They said, our clients are the arcade owners. Mm-hmm. And what we didn't say to them was, but we're the clients of the arcade owners. And if we leave, everybody goes bankrupt. And they didn't get that message. So
then they all went bankrupt.
They all went bankrupt.
They had a rough couple of years.
But it was because they thought that they could get by with Super Pac-Man, Pac-Man Jr., Mrs. Pac-Man's stepson's cousin.
Professor Pac.
Professor Pac-Man.
Yeah, no. Pac-Man, Ms. Pac-Man, none of the other ones count. Pac-Land. You know who I'm looking at.
Yeah, we actually have most of them in the collection, but we're not proud about it. We're not happy.
But the point is that there's one moment when the very first Pac-Man came and you're like, oh my gosh.
Right.
Then, Miss Pac-Man was actually a very well done sequel.
It was cool.
Same thing, Centipede, Millipede, Galaxian, Galaga, Defender, Stargate. There was a lot of good follow-on games that made sense. Like the difference is that today we have patches. You have Counter-Strike. There's you find a gap, you find a mistake, then you do a patch online, you fix it. But back then they did it. Oops, we found that in the Centipede you could do the side feed and you could kind of here are all the things that are wrong with it. Now you get another shot.
Right, they'd get to release a whole nother game. get all the like revenue from that, but also fix all their issues before. So it was like, I don't know, in many ways better, but you know, like the developers today would be like, no, you have to like be able to live patch everything out. But back then they had to get it at least good enough to release. Like they had to have a certain amount of like testing, and then the players would find like these obscure issues, like stuff that you couldn't find automatically, and then they would release the second one, which they would, you know, eventually Capcom in the 90s would be like, sweet, we love this.
Every one of them a different game.
We're going to release 7 versions of the same game. And then, of course, pay to play happened almost because of that, I think. I don't know.
Well, the other thing was that it was, you know, I remember I have in Playmeter, which is one of the industry magazines, there was an article written and it mentions, you know, when I hear Ben Gold spent 36 hours on a game, I'm thinking that this young punk is tying up my $2,000
Were you in the office meeting with us?
What?
Never mind.
We've been talking about that a lot, about balancing playtime with, rotation and everything. But yeah, we're still going through that today.
Well, but the thing was, there was no concept of creating a culture that would, and granted, the solution was online where you have monthly fees where you could play all you want. The ironic thing is that back then I played, I would go to school, I'd come home, I would maybe do a after school sport, and from 5:30 till 9, I would go to the arcade. That's 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That was considered obscene. Today, if your kid only played 3.5 hours, you'd be like, thank goodness that was all you played. My gosh, you actually...
I actually saw him today.
I saw him...
Especially if you found out that your kid was going out to the world, socializing with people, playing a game and getting good at something. And like, it's a whole different world. Because like when I was playing Counter-Strike, I'd wake up at 6:30. I'd play the 2 hours before school. I'd get off of school. I'd play about 4 or 5 hours. And that was like 5 to 7 days per week. And I was like early. I'm not like these Fortnite kids that just live. Like they can play it during school. It's crazy.
They play during school.
Well, because it's on your phone. Like they'll get phones when they're teenagers and that's all they're doing. Like Minecraft and Fortnite, they own the high schools.
I do love the local gaming aspect of arcades. Being able to play with somebody, see them there, talk to them, discuss whatever... Whether it's a competition or whether it's a competition between me and you or a competition between us and the developer trying to figure out how to get to the last part of that game or beat it. I love the whole local community friendship thing that happens in arcades, which is so weird because my parents would tell me I was never going anywhere because I'm playing arcade games and you're not meeting people. But I am meeting people. It's so weird.
So let me ask you this because... we talked a little bit offline, but I will tell you that I find the classic arcade community, especially on Facebook, are either pricks or dysfunctional, or they're people that never had families or social skills. And, I've now what's happened is that there's so many different factions. Like I was friends with, in the early, let's say 2010, when there was the first induction to the, Video Game Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame, right?
Everybody kind of met together. We were all one big happy family. Twin Galaxies was the scorekeeper, and there was this feeling generally of positive feelings. Now they've splintered into probably 15 different factions, and I just don't talk to anybody because if I make a post to one person, 14 other people are going to hate me. So I just stay silent on everything. Except for once in a while, I'll chime in.
Well, so we're really weird because like 95% of our community, which is the biggest arcade community group in the world at this exact moment, at least on Facebook, is new. Like they didn't play arcade games until they found them at Free Play. And they're mostly like, the 25 to 45 year olds. So it's a whole new generation and they're all just pretty positive, mostly because Chris got to build the group from the ground up, and anyone who was kind of like toxic or negative got booted pretty fast.
So I would love
built into the culture,
right? Yeah.
See, and that was the fun thing we did when we were, when like right now I don't like. I remember when I had people interview me and say, "So Ben, are you the best? Stargate player?" And I'm like, no, you could probably kick my ass. I'm going, but
there's no way I could beat you at Stargate.
So the I said, I don't know. I said, but it's like I'm going. There's two different philosophies. There's the Brett Favre and the Roger Staubach. So Brett Favre kept played well into his 40s. Like he always wanted to relive the glory, you know, and even when his body was bruised or whatever, he kept playing. And I'm like, there's a bunch of 40, 50-year-olds who want to do the 100-hour thing and they want to do the endurance. And I'm like, you know what? That's fine. You know, if you enjoy trying to set up, you know, to spend 58 hours in front of a computer and play, that's totally your thing. I like to look at Roger Staubach. I don't think Roger Staubach really gives a shit about throwing a football class. He was the best for his era.
He was good.
He was good. He won Super Bowls. He had a fantastic career. He went on to real estate. He went on to business. He went on to say that was a part of my life. He still probably signs footballs and he still goes to football events if he's honored. But he's not trying to show somebody that I can still get on the field.
Yeah, I can still hit this
and I can,
target.
you know, and I'm going to be better than Tom Brady. Okay.
Well, I think the interesting thing about free play is like if Chris went tonight to Free Play Richardson just down the street, he'd probably have, I don't know, 20 or 30 people in there that know who he is. And they're just going to play games together and have fun and not really be too serious. And then the ones that'll get really, really good will later contact him and be like, I think I'm pretty good at this. Can you tell me if I'm good? And they'll slowly build up to potentially like a high score run.
Right, but they'll do it organically too, because
Right.
it'll just be us playing with our friends, and we're getting better and better. And then you look at the high scoreboard, and you're like, "Did you know that you've broken the Daytona USA world record like 30 times, Bryce?"
And they'll be like, okay,
Yeah,
that's cool. And that's kind of how it's been at our place.
And that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
To me, that's where the fun is, because then you don't, you know, to me, that was always the, you know, so the fun part was when I was young was playing. Now when I go to these events, I mean, I will see Billy maybe once a year, twice a year. I like to say hello to Walter and Steve Sanders, and there's a few other people that I like to see. But the moment that you start throwing the politics in, I mean, again, I was very, I kind of took an exception when Billy was kicked out of the Guinness Book of World Records, kicked out of, because I'm like, look, I'll say this, that if Billy Mitchell wasn't there, probably free play, I don't know if free play would be as successful as it is.
Well, one of the things we've had to say recently, and people on like YouTube and our social media have taken some exception to it, is we've just been like, guys, it doesn't really sound like high scores matter all that much. Y'all have to like really get past that and just try to improve personally at the games you love. Because we're looking at right now, like if we go to Twin Galaxies and we look at the like late 80s, 99% are referee verified. And, you know, I was 3 years old at the time. I don't know who's verifying these scores or anything. And the truth is, way before there was any drama, we were just like, we're going to have our own high score list. And even on our own high score list, we're not going to care that much.
Right.
Like it doesn't
can't really police it that well.
We're not super interested. We just want to play games with people and have fun.
And that's the way it should be. And what happens is you get a couple of people that I remember Roy Schilt, for example, and I mean I will tell you, Billy still has a very deep emotional, doesn't like to talk about Roy, doesn't still even, like in 2013, I don't want to see him. I don't want him to be near me. I looked at Roy as just a psychological disaster, like a sad story of somebody who in 1985 had a game that maybe it was the most amazing missile command game in the world, and somehow nobody was watching him play, and he wants to get recognition. But to ruin his next 30 years because of that event, and I tried to talk to him in 2010, and I said, Roy, can't you just let it go? Really, is that really that important to you? When you think about what you've done in this world and you think of, do you have a family, kids, whatever, is that really that important, that high score and that recognition? Since Roy, the one person who I think is a total prick and I don't care is Rudy Ferretti.
I don't know.
You don't know him. And I don't care if he hears this because
he's not from Dallas. I don't care.
Right, but I'm just saying, like someone who is so. There's these people.
I actually got Billy Mitchell to come to the arcade so I could meet you.
Well,
but it's true. Actually, it's true. We've actually for a long time been figuring out, like, because we're Dallas kids, right? And we've grown up seeing bin gold Dallas, Texas, and we've been like, yes, we have to figure out a way. And that was the best way we could.
Everybody's like, Billy Mitchell's over there playing Donkey Kong, and I'm watching you play Centipede on a cocktail.
Well, and if you watch Chris's during the broadcast, you're like, all right, Billy Mitchell's playing Pac-Man, and Chris is like, I don't know. What's up with you, Ben?
but I'm like, look, I'm local. I don't really. So here's the thing: is that it would be, if you ask me, for example, if you have those kinds of players, I'd love to do workshops with you or stuff like that. So we should just do that. I mean, if it's on a weekend. My wife has been a little bit. She's not a big video game fan, but partially because I tried these. Did different things, different activities. I said, hey, this could become very profitable. And the video game arcade, I tried to do a couple of other things with Walter, and they never really panned out. And usually it was because of, internal fighting in the video game community, which I was like, I'm done with that.
The secret I found is to hire my wife, general counsel of our company. Therefore, she loves video games.
I do like working for lawyers too. That makes things much easier. Am I going to get sued? I don't know. Corey, am I going to get sued? Yes. Okay, we're not doing that.
Because my wife and I went to law school, and as soon as Free Play got big enough, we hired her as our general counsel, and ever since she's been totally into arcade games. It's been awesome.
Well, that's good that you've been. And the thing is, you have a really fantastic plan. I mean, I will tell you that I have seen in my life easily, 10. I don't know. I mean, if I'm thinking from the 80s, hundreds of arcades that failed. I've seen the attempts in the early 2000s, and they failed. There were a lot of barcades that came and went. So the fact that you came up with a good culture, I like the fact that you have younger people, because usually the fact you're telling me that they're the 20s and 30s.
Yeah, no. Dylan Smith is he's been on this podcast before. He's one of the most talented players I've ever seen at classic arcade games, and he's like 20.
Yeah, he was born in the 90s.
Like early 20s, mid 20s, maybe now.
He doesn't apply for them, but he has probably 5 or 6 world records.
I remember the day I met him. He was actually on the first date with his now wife
at Free Play.
At Free Play, Arlington. And he set a score on Burger Time. We were playing a little chain game in the venue. And he set a score, and anybody could beat the score for a T-shirt. It was literally his first time to play Burger Time. Literally his first time. And it was something that nobody could achieve. We had to end it there. And I remember Matt Johnson was like, that guy's a pro.
Matt Johnson, now GM of Free Play Arlington.
He's played that game before. No, it was really his first time. Like, he's just a natural. He's played tons of games. He's won tons of tournaments. We've
discovered some people. It's pretty awesome.
That's really funny because
they're just players.
I don't know if you ever heard of a guy named Donald Hayes. He's I'm trying to think where he's located, but I met him in about 15 years ago when they were filming Chasing Ghosts. One of the best. He wasn't in the 80s, but he set a bunch of world records. Like, he has a world record on Millipede of 10 million,
nice.
Which is absolutely amazing. And he had picked like the top 10 classic games, Frogger. I mean, he had set the records on those. Mm-hmm. And I still have high respect. I remember looking at him and saying, and when I was asking him, I said, so I kind of went through and I said, so let me see. So you have the world record on Millipede, 10 million. I'm going, okay. I said, if I were to beat your record, I said I would probably need to practice for about 6 months. I would need to put at least 4 or 5 hours a day, take some sort of pain medication on my hands, the arthritis and stuff like that would happen. I said, but you know what? If you put a gun to my head and said, I'm not going to get my kids back unless you beat that score, I said, I could probably do it. Uh-huh. I said, but I would be divorced. Uh-huh. Yes. And I kind of joked and I said, you're not married, are you? And he's like, no. And I said to him, yeah, because I said, honestly, the amount of dedication and energy and time it would take to get certain scores here are just, it's insane. And, so that was...
Marathon scores in particular don't interest me as much because of that
They've kind of stopped interesting me, right? Like, because we kind of got the first few world records set at Free Play that were like, we have to stay open for 24, 36 hours.
But even that was just an excuse to get everybody together and a bonding experience. We
needed to party. We went and got sponsors for each time.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I'm just kind of like, I want to know, like, I mean, that's why things like fighting games have kind of caught my attention, because they're fast. The best players kind of determined really quickly.
Well, it's also innately social. Anytime you get a multiplayer at the same time game.
And it's 1v1, yeah.
Well, and that's the other thing is that there's other things that you could do if you really wanted to make an interesting competition. Like one of the things that I learned at the 7-Eleven was they had 6 machines of Defender. We had to play on each of them, and in the qualifying round, and all 6 of them were done on different settings. And and this is a pretty funny story where they kind of did the similar thing where they would add up all your scores, and whoever had the highest score.
Was that the one that was easy, hard, or something like that on the scoring?
Yeah, and this guy who was really, I remember this because I got myself to the either quarterfinals, semifinals, whatever it was, but I wasn't the best player. But this one guy was real cocky, and I watched all the people playing, and when I saw the final one, I knew how hard it was, and he didn't. And so he was winning. And then he got to that and he died quickly. And then when I went on mine, I just did the best. And then on that one, I survived. All I wanted to do is survive the 10 minutes, which I barely did. And when I was finishing up my final game, he looked at my score and then he looked at me and he said, "What did you do on your first whatever?" And I told him all of my scores, and all of a sudden he realized that he lost.
Right.
But he learned it after.
Right.
So my point is that you could do, if you can get 10 to 20 hardcore players of a game, and there's a lot of different ways to structure an interesting
up the
challenge.
difficulty. I like it.
You up the or you have 2 or 3 different games. You put a time limit on it, and you see average scores, etc. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways you can make it very fun, competitive, and interesting.
All right, so kind of out there question. So we went through the bus tour.
Yeah.
Around 2003, this is a personal question. 2002, were you in Minneapolis at the Mall of America during Walter Day and Billy Mitchell's big hurrah they had there? They had probably 30 arcade games there, a big stage in the middle, and they were going for there were a bunch of world records trying to be set at that exact. The only reason I'm asking is I happened to be there. That was the first time I met Walter Day or Billy Mitchell, and I was wondering if you were there too.
I wasn't there, but I will say this, that I went from 85 to 2000, or was 99, absolutely no contact with anyone. I think I talked to Billy maybe once in the late 80s, and that was it. And then in I'll say 99, 2000.
That's around Perfect Pac-Man era.
I got a phone call. I was living in Romania. And I guess what Billy did was he had an old phone number of me, which was a fax number of my folks. And he sent a fax saying, "I'm looking for Ben Gold." They gave him my number, and him and Walter called me. And we and they explained to me that video games are big, and there's a resurgence of the classic gaming, and we're famous. And I'm like, who's famous? Okay. I'm like, what do you know? Walter is always like, embellishing, and, he kind of speaks things before it happens. Like he goes, there are documentaries. This is like 2001. There's all these documentaries that are going to be about us. We are going to be so famous. And
I wasn't wrong.
Right.
No, he was. He was
mixed bag, but he wasn't wrong.
A little early, but
it just took him 5 extra years before that happened. But, that was the, I was kind of used to that hyperbole. I mean, I love the guy, but
well, it's hard to be a showman, right? I've learned this myself. Like, you can only say so many things about how great everything you're doing is, and then it starts to wear on you. But it seems like Walter has been really good at just digging it back up and keep going. Certainly in the late 90s, that's crazy because everything was dead. And yet he was like, it's time to get excited about arcades.
Well, I think I want to say 99 was when Billy finally hit the Perfect Pac-Man game. So that's honestly, that's the first time I can remember. Like,
well, Namco had Billy Mitchell out on the stage, and then at the Mall of America event that I was at, they were touring with Walter Day's 1,000-page book, and they had 15 or 16 arcade gamers signing their page and everything.
Yeah,
and I remember Walter Day pulling me aside. And because I was a Counter-Strike player at the time, he saw all the crowd there for Counter-Strike. He's like, "I'm putting you in this book. Y'all are going to be at the back." because y'all are the future of games, and this is I don't think we ever got put in the book, but I remember him being like, this is the future, and I remember just being like, who is this guy? Like, I had no idea what a Walter Day was at the time,
or why he was wearing a referee's uniform.
Well, no, and this was really funny because what was really crazy to me, I remember feeling really like honored because I was like 16, and he hands me his 1,000-page book that's signed by a bunch of people, and he was like, you're going to be in this next year or something. And I was like, this is amazing. I love gaming now. And he was so excited. And he actually introduced us in Counter-Strike. He had no idea what Counter-Strike was, but he was like the paid speaker for the event. So that was like my first introduction to this whole world that I'd get into later.
Well, that is so funny that you mentioned. That sounds so Walter.
Right.
It's just talking to a bunch of Counter-Strike players who don't know what our classic arcade games are. Yeah.
Well, I'll say this, that one of the things that Walter did, and this is a perfect example. So in the 2010 Video Game Hall of Fame,
Yes,
Walter, I think he was like in an event in Seattle, and I don't know why or how, but he promised every single person there that they would be in the induction class of the Video Game Hall of Fame.
Oh, wow.
So what
Very
happens
individual.
is, so it was just weird because, I made that class, Billy did. We had like the some really, really high, we had what is his name?
Company?
No. One of the modern players in. Oh my gosh!
Alex Vive?
Fatality.
Power? Oh, Fatality. Okay.
Oh, Fatality, yeah.
Fatality
he
was
actually came up in my generation. He was our same age, yeah.
So Fatality was there. We had all these really. Steve Wiebe was there. We had Billy, me, but then there were like, and I would say that we did stuff. We had accomplished stuff, and then you had this 15 or 20 people that got this score on Super Pac-Man or whatever. I mean, you're like, what the hell? And so that literally caused so many problems because then this first class, you're like, I think the quote unquote the idea of the Hall of Fame just lost a lot of credibility.
Yeah, you have the good scores on games like Stargate and Millipede and
like the
Donkey Kong and then you have Super Pac-Man.
Well, the people who've been famous for years and the people who've in the meantime set some scores. And yeah, no, when you look at the 2010 class, I'm like, this is epic, except for some people. And I felt the same way though, because I guess they've done they took like 5 years off, right? Then they did like a 2015, 2017, 2019, something like that.
They've done that, and I'll just say that there was a time right after that 2010 that I actually was very involved trying to put it back on track. And I'll just say that it was a very frustrating experience because my vision was to treat this like any other Hall of Fame where you get journalists, you get different other people to set up objective standards.
Right.
And I was like, maybe in 5 years we'll dilute it enough that we put really objective standards. So it's not Walter promising people that he's going to put them in there, but
they're in,
but really a system. And I'm like, and maybe I shouldn't have been in that first round, whatever. I don't really know. But my point is that
well, you were the first and most celebrated video game champion.
We're speculating that more people watched That's Incredible than any other video game competition ever.
Yeah, we went and we looked at all the new Twitch stats and everything, and we're pretty sure that might be still the most watched video game competition of all time. Yeah,
I mean, there's 3 channels.
Yeah, right.
That's
right. Back then, you're talking like That's Incredible still had it was like number 5 on all of TV each week. So you were talking like 17 million people ish watching. I mean, there weren't the market share was interesting, and nowadays on Twitch, if you get like 1 million people on Twitch, that's
incredible,
right?
That is absolutely stunning.
You're totally rich from your sponsors,
yes.
But something like 17 million has never been talked about, and we were trying to calculate, and we think that could be true.
Well, the I'll just say that again, it was. When I see Billy, we don't talk high scores. We don't talk, I don't even talk games. I just like to make fun of him because I think when you saw I was very sarcastic. Like, I'm like, Billy, watch out. There's a barrel.
Yeah.
That's about my strategy with him. Because, it's just, that was, we have a much, our relationship is much deeper and plus, I mean, I don't know. it's fun. Like it would be fun to teach somebody what I know about video games because I think I probably know a few things that the kiddos don't know.
Well, I guarantee you have more knowledge on like Centipede and Millipede than all the players that would show up for some sort of like impromptu course or whatever.
Yeah, you broke our arcade record just sort of casually on the cocktail, but you didn't have the number one spot on the game itself, so we didn't submit the score. But like just sort of casually, I haven't played this in 20 years or however long you said it had been.
But yeah, I guarantee
that right there was bigger than our listed arcade record.
A ton of people would show up. And we have to, not obviously world-class players, but we have a ton of people who want to be good at the game.
Well, you know, it'd be great. I mean, let's put it this way. I remember in 2010 or 2012 when I was at Richie Nichols Arcade and I had a group of 5 or 6 people that were asking me questions, and I'm like, wow, nobody's ever asked me. It's like I feel like it's this lost art or this language that nobody, there's a dead language. Like nobody really cares how you go about and the whole strategy in some of these games.
No, I'm curious how you pin a centipede and score off the
I was watching the video trying to learn because it was like in one of your interviews they've referenced offhand and then they showed it and I was like, what did he do? And so no, I guarantee we have like dozens of people trying to learn this.
Basically, everything you do up to the point where you've maxed out the difficulty level of the game, and then it becomes marathon. Just continue to go.
Well, actually,
everything up till then. That's what I'm really interested in.
So here's the deal about Centipede and Millipede, and why this Donald Hayes' 10 million score is so amazing. It's not a marathon. Mm-hmm. You only can have 6 men at any given point, and the difficulty level for both games. If you hit a snag, right, your game can be over in 1 minute and 30 seconds. That fast, because you get complete with mushrooms, and all of a sudden, boom, they come down. You're all dead. And I told them, I said so 10 million means you're on absolute highest adrenaline, 10 solid hours, not able to take a moment break.
Well, and after you've been playing for a long time,
and you can't you don't have enough time to go pee. that even if you wait for it to go back.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Even if you wait, maybe you have to wait for it to turn over and go a little bit slow, and then you might be able to go pee. But that would be about it.
Yeah,
that's about it.
Oh yeah, we have all the records, right? Even like Lauren Featherstone or anything, banking lives and then running to the restroom, coming back 5-10 minutes later.
That's when you get the 80-hour games, like up to that, when you can use the restroom.
Yeah, and so there's a couple of games which are really, they're not quite marathon. They're not, they're just they're that much more difficult. But conceptually speaking, it's refreshing to hear people talk about the games and not about the whole, about the just everything that doesn't have to do with games,
Yeah, I mean, people like characters and that seems to dominate a lot of, but in our world, it's a lot more about the games because we kind of have just existed on our
and the games.
Yeah, we've existed kind of on an island where we're like really, really excited about people who are good at the games, but we don't really venture out very much, which I think has been both good and bad. Like we're not part of the big overarching like arcade world, like the Richie Knuckles, the Kong offs, all of that stuff. We haven't really broken into. Despite, like our arcade popularity being like through the roof. And
you know what? There's a part of me that says you're better off just keeping in your bubble because the moment that you align yourself and you say, well, hey, and I love Richie, by the way, but the moment you say, I'm going to do this with, especially Donkey Kong, oh my God, you just do anything with Donkey Kong and then 80% of the people are going to start, getting upset because you have the nerve to do something with some person. So anyway, my point is, what you've got here, this bubble, is fantastic.
We're into it.
I wouldn't change it.
What's funny is we ran like a almost 40-person Donkey Kong tournament.
Donkey Kong 1, 2, and 3. Yeah.
For was it the 35th?
35th anniversary.
35th anniversary, and the best part was we made it totally unapproachable because it was Donkey Kong 1, then Donkey Kong Jr., then Donkey Kong 3.
No. Wait, no.
Was it the other way around? Really?
Yeah, we started with 3. Because I remember I practiced Donkey Kong 3 a little bit. It was just Galaxian. And then I practiced Donkey Kong 2, which I'm also with you on that one. But like, but I wanted to be good enough to make it to the finals, and then I knew Chris Wilson was going to win Donkey Kong.
Right.
Like that was it. Like
that was a fun tournament.
If I could get there, I'm good.
But we had like custom T-shirts and stuff. But yeah, we had like 40 or so people in there. And they all played Donkey Kong 3 to start.
Yes.
And that's how you know we live in a bubble, because I was like, it's obvious.
But that's one of Richard's favorite
Donkey
games.
Kong 3.
Yeah.
So.
God. And that's so nice, because it's just that's kind of the fun thing, because you lose sight of why did we do stupid things when I was 14, 15, 16. Why? It's because we had so much fun playing. And I don't know. I mean, I enjoy playing with people that I know. Like that's part of it. And then sometimes there's some techniques that I really, really admire watching. For example, you brought up Missile Command. I really like watching high-level Missile Command players. They put that line of bullets across the screen, and then they just knock out everything every time. It's with a trackball, the precision there, the timing.
The monster trackball too. That's the thing that gets me. Like when I play Missile Command, I'm like moving around. I'm like, all right, I got this level. This level. And then like the third level, I'm like, how do they do it? How do they move so fast?
Yeah, and it just when you see it happen, just and they blow up everything.
And it's like you gotta kind of use your like that, your thumbs to do that.
So cool.
Oh, and Defender Stargate, like I cannot comprehend like that control scheme with the buttons, especially was it reversed? It's over here. Is that what it is? Yeah, like it's so foreign and so like I can only compare it to like a Mech Warrior game. Like it's so obscure the way the buttons are spread out like that.
Because it's funny, because that would also, I mean, I could probably...
There's not gears and levers or anything like that. There's not a mouse and keyboard. And a mouse and keyboard would technically be much more expansive. But as far as like, you have something like Killer Queen, a modern game, it's left, right button. Like that's it. Just joust controls.
Well, what cracks me up is I watch or I play Defender, and then I go play like, and I'm not trying to throw shade or anything at Eugene Jarvis right now, but I play Defender and I cannot imagine being able to like work on that game, because like to me, it was so far ahead of everything at the time. It was so fast. The graphics were so cool because of the way the pixels exploded and everything. Like it blows me away that no one is making arcade games like that anymore. Like it's so advanced.
Well, I would say that what made Defender such an amazing game, and I respect very much Eugene Jarvis, is that it was the gameplay. So, for example, the concept of a roving landscape where you had a radar that you could see what's going on. You had the saving of the humanoids, turning into mutants. So you're saving the human population, basically, and the fact that it was. The way the controls went up and down, backwards, forwards, and each of your enemies had specific characteristics. So I don't know if you know this, but the red ones that explode, you kind of have the bomb, right? You explode. The those little red bombers that come there, the way you do is you have to get go behind them at the same speed they're going, and they won't turn around.
Okay.
So you have to kind of first go through them and then reverse and then go behind them, and then you just pick them off.
We need Austin for this part.
Right.
Okay.
Austin Smith's a great player.
And then you would have to be careful about the bombs. There was also a way to use the smart bomb. So if you reversed right when you click the smart bomb, then they would explode and not turn into a bunch of red things. So my point is that these were all the techniques that we learned, but it was a brilliant game. It was a very, and it took a while. That was like one of those games that captured my imagination. And then when Stargate came out, it was kind of cool because they actually did several improvements about it. I think there was an invisible, I can't remember if it's an invisible button, but there was the hyper, you could hyperspace. There's a bunch of things.
Invisibomb or whatever.
I forget what that was. There were different things in there that were just really powerful. And so my point is that was, is ahead of its time. And I loved Robotron too. That one I never was really good at.
Robotron's,
you're talking about ahead of its time. Like most Xbox 360 live arcade games that were released,
they're just dual stick shooters.
Or dual stick shooters. Like he created the genre. Like,
right. Well, and
still played
the first
today.
time you complete a level on Robotron and the screen goes brrr, and it's incredible. And no, it's really absurd to me. But my favorite part about retro arcade games is, of course, the very best game developers in the world were just making arcade games because everything else was junk. You're very, very no one that mattered was making the console games like 2600 or whatever. Those were all garbage.
Right.
They were on those arcade consoles that were going to sell for $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 in the 80s. And they were killing themselves to make the very, very best arcade games. And it's hard for me today, of course, because they don't make arcade games like that anymore.
No.
Like they don't find the best. Now it's about trying to figure out how to make the most dollars per play and give out the fewest tickets.
Well, then also
how to get the most high score list on your game,
right?
So that everybody can be the champion.
And let's just let's talk about in-app purchases.
Right. Yeah. No. It's well, I was playing Injustice, the arcade game, and they made me buy a card.
The card one?
Yeah, they made me buy a card, and then I finished my round, and they gave me 2 more cards, and they gave me the option for $3 more to get 1 more card. And I was like, and this was supposed to be a fighting game, and that was kind of the end of that game for me. But yeah, no, it's definitely gone off the rails. Whereas, I mean, used to, I think a quarter is about 80 cents in today's money. So these operators, and I was reading about like pizza joints were making like 10 to 20% of their revenue off of arcade games back in the early 80s. And I think about like our business, and I think about like any business, and I'm like, wow, they must have thought this was definitely the future, which is, you can kind of see the growth.
Could have been. Well, actually it was.
It
just
was
moved away from pizza
bit,
joints.
Yeah, it was for a little bit.
I will tell you the first game that broke the mold of video games as far as a profit machine was a game called Moon Patrol. Okay, and the reason was Moon Patrol was the first game where you died, but you put another quarter in and you continue where you stopped.
Yeah.
And that was the very first time where I'm like, wait a second. You're ruined. No longer do you know who the best player is.
Right.
Because if I come with a $20 worth of quarters, I could be better than any other player.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that was why, what was it? Gauntlet was the top earning game the year it came out. Because you could just keep getting more life. No, you could just keep putting in quarters and expand your life bar as much as you wanted. And you could get low and you'd be like, come on, insert more quarters. And people did. And they fed it. And I mean, it was a big earner, but that was it. That was the beginning of the end, right? But here we are now. We've got 500 arcade games out right now.
Well, now we have free play, right? It's all free. It doesn't matter. The adding quarters doesn't matter. So it's all arbitrary. So a game like Ninja Turtles, we talked about this many times, a Konami beat 'em up where thought I was a token muncher back in the day.
Oh, it was good. It was a good earner back in the day.
Sure, it was, right? But it's almost like unplayable if you just like do what you see every day, which is cowabunga, and you pile up 70, 80 lives, and you quickly take the stakes out of the game. Well, us veteran free play arcade players, we've put the stakes back in. Let's play 1 credit and see how far we can get.
Well, that's why I love games that don't have a continue. Like Defender is one of my favorite games on free play because it doesn't really matter. You get to start your game and you're that's it. Good luck.
Right, but the stakes, they've changed. Yeah, they've really changed, sure. and you have to put your own stakes on them because it's not a quarter on the line, but it is your time. And yeah, we've come full circle where there's plenty of players who come to free play and they mash the buttons and they just want to pile up the highest score and say, look, I got number 1 for today. And that's fine.
That is my favorite thing when people set a daily high score, and they come up on our forums and they're like, a third or a tenth of the high score, and they're like, I did it, I set the high score. And it's like very, very carefully that people are like, well, maybe check out this place. But
right.
So let's go ahead and come full circle. So what was it? 3 months ago, we had Billy Mitchell come. It was really funny because you were talking about how Billy Mitchell has like a photographic memory, and he kept like, his way to kind of poke you was to be like, you remember this? And he'd pick like some obscure location, some obscure day. And then your way of poking him was be like, you've got like 3 barrels, make sure they don't hit you. Like, I loved that commentary. Like it was one of my favorite experiences because he would poke you and you'd poke him back. As he, first he did near perfect pack, and then he played Donkey Kong at an insanely high level, which was a lot of fun for us. Like we got a lot of flack, just for even like letting him play in our games. But I feel like, we've set our whole reputation on real games, And there's nothing better than having a high level player like Billy Mitchell come and actually play our games.
Well, what did he end up getting? I know. What was his?
He kill screened.
So
Pac-Man.
Pac was 2 moves off perfect, like 1,400 or so off perfect. I can't remember. He missed one of the ghosts that would have been 1,600 actually.
Right.
And then he missed one other thing I can't remember.
Yeah, but he didn't make the kill screen of Donkey Kong. He tried until like I want to say he was there till 4 a.m. that day.
My, really?
Yeah.
And he had to go back to the expo the very next day
And do all of his kind of.
And he's like, "You gonna be there?" And I'm like, "I'm going to sleep." But
Right.
thanks.
Well, there's a great photo of like Free Play Arcade at, I don't know, 3:30 in the morning, and there's like 8 people watching Billy play.
Oh yeah.
And they're all just like this, and Billy's just like there, and he's having his best run finally.
Right.
He's making a real
Well,
run.
and that's what happened is he had a bunch of false starts, and he was kind of like it was all kind of getting to him the pomp and circumstance of the arcade and how
Right.
crazy it is.
I don't
And
think he
were
was
there,
quite
and-
prepared for walking into a party and having to play Donkey Kong in the
It was
middle
Saturday
of it all.
night. It was a party at Free Play Arlington.
Everyone around
I remember that.
Yeah.
screaming. The music's loud. It's not a kind place to try to set high scores. That's
no,
for sure.
no, and you are setting a legit high score if you can do it in that environment. So it was. I want to say it was like 11:30 or midnight when he actually like started like getting his run going and like, okay, this is a good game, and he just plowed on through the closing time, and it's like, well, I've got the key, and we just kept on streaming.
Yeah.
So what did he get? Like 600,000?
Yeah.
He got 700,000.
7 and change or
I
something.
can look up the score.
He had some unbelievable moments that have now on our Twitch channel been like retwitched or however that works.
Because
where
he certainly
like a
has the
clip.
arcade record now.
Yeah, they do like a clip of it, and some of it has been watched thousands and thousands of times because he did some really, really cool stuff. Because like, you could tell by about 2:30, he was just like, I'm either going to do it or I'm not. And so he was just going for it the whole way, like full speed ahead. And it was so cool as like someone who used to, like before I started the arcade, of course, I thought I was pretty good at Donkey Kong. And now I've had a bunch of players come and show me that I'm not. And then Billy Mitchell comes and he's doing stuff like I couldn't even dream of. And that was what I really thought would show that he was so good at Donkey Kong is he's freestyling in a rush at 3 a.m. with people all around him, still trying to like cheer him on. And he's doing stuff that I could never even dream of. It was really cool. It was awesome.
And so that's the thing is that, is love him or hate him, he has amazing skill in the games he plays. And to me, that's the part was that, I could tell back in the day, we had people that lied outright.
Right.
I'd watch him play for 5 minutes and I could tell you if you were lying or if I would do it, just ask a few questions and I knew. And so anyway, so that's neither here nor there. I'm just curious here. I know we're running out of time. What else would you like to know, or what other things did you want to talk about or cover in this conversation? I'm just curious.
718,400 points.
That was
Billy's
That was
top
his
score.
4 a.m. score.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, he was. I mean, you could tell he was upset that he couldn't start another.
Right.
one.
Yeah, he wanted
You
a
could tell-
million, and
you
he
could tell
wanted
he
a
would have
kill
played all
screen,
night,
and
but
yeah.
he had obligations the next
He wanted
day.
us to bring the Donkey Kong to the
Okay, so I have here's actually something that I've been sitting on forever, and I've mentioned it once or twice in the podcast. Walter Day's original 1,000-page book.
Yes.
He talks about a 100-hour challenge. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about right now?
Well, I know that's been like the unicorn in the video game, the classic game industry, like somebody to spend 100 hours in front of a game.
Well, apparently, allegedly, I don't know, 1981, 1982, he gets a $10,000 insurance policy, but that he called a sponsorship, that said if anyone plays 100 hours, they would win the $10,000. And he has this big long narrative that sounds like, when I was 16 the first time I read it, because that was in Minnesota, where he hands me this book and I read his story and I'm like, this is incredible. Now I'm like, I don't know how much of it happened, but there's stories about him putting extension cords on all the games so that the players could pull them into the toilet and use the toilet during the 100 hours and stuff. Did you have any part of that? Do you remember anything like that?
I don't. That'll be honestly, I don't remember.
There's a story about a random person from Japan. Like this Asian guy shows up and he plays 96 hours and then leaves. Like he doesn't even finish his. And it was a 100-hour challenge. I love this story, but the more I've played video games, I'm like,
No, I think the biggest verified person was Qbert, 83 hours with Richie Knuckles. that is, I think, the longest verified arcade game. I don't believe that someone played 96 hours.
Well, in the story, there were like 4 people that played that long.
I mean, if you mean 4 people? Well,
4 different people on their first credit that played 96 hours. And I mean, Walter Day goes into details about how like he only had so many games in his arcade because it's a pretty small arcade actually.
Yes.
And he's talking about how some people picked Pac-Man because they know they could like go in a circle and hide in a corner and last forever, while other people were playing like hard games like Defender, and they were like, we're gonna do 100 hours, which I guess nowadays, not Defender, but Robotron had a 90+ hour game at this point.
I think you'd have to look that up, but I don't. Like I said, that's folklore. I mean, like I said,
I loved it. I think it's a really cool story, but yeah.
so here's the thing that from a physical point of view, going to 36 hours is basically one night. Now, there were people that maybe went another 24 to 60. You know, you go, let's say 60 hours. I was going by I remember as I hit my 40 million points, I remember the Defender screen all of a sudden went green. And I was looking at everybody, I said, didn't the screen go green? Mm-hmm. The background, instead of being black, it went dark green to me. And I looked at it and everyone's going, no, Ben, the screen is black. I would say that the human body cannot do, 60 hours is insane.
Yes.
That's 2 nights. Now, 82
You're hurting
hours.
yourself. This is why I don't like those particular style of records, because they are hurting yourself.
You're hurting yourself. 82 hours, and again, there might be folklore about people. I don't believe those are verified. I don't remember reading that story from Walter. Just so you know, he had in that first book the story of us traveling in the bus.
Yes.
And everything there was true.
Okay.
So everything about the golden age where he talked about, I read that cringingly, because there were he talks about me getting a shot and a bunch of other stuff that happened, but it was true.
In the book I read, that was the second story. The first one was the $10,000 $100 challenge, and then it was the bus tour, and they were actually it was really funny because it was a 1,000-page guide, and it was supposed to be the high scores, but like the first 115 pages were just stories.
Yes.
And I remember just, being a teenager opening that up and being like, what is this? This is insanity. Which I had no idea I was ever going to open an arcade or anything. But that I've always been looking, I need to get Walter Day. I need to talk to him about this story because it defined my childhood. Like I used to play like Quake 2 or Counter-Strike Quake 3. The games that I was really, really good at and was traveling around. I would do like a 40-hour session. Mm-hmm. And I was in the prime of my life. I was 18 years old or something. And as it went much past that, no.
Yeah, The 25-hour run that we do once a year, that's more than enough for me.
Well, yeah, we'll do a 25-hour charity run, and it'll wipe 50 people out. They're done by the end of it. They're just ready to go home, go to sleep.
Absolutely.
But there is the Man vs. Snake documentary. I think it has a 70+ hour Nibbler
Tim
game.
McVeigh, yes.
Yeah, so maybe it's possible. I don't know. I think we're about out of time. This has been awesome. Great, awesome podcast.
Thanks for coming out.
Talking to Ben Gold, of course, the Dallas legend. If you've ever read a high score guide or a magazine about arcade gaming in Dallas, Ben Gold was the guy. We, of course, when we opened up our arcade, it was our dream to get him to go to our arcade, and now he has. That's so cool. We're wrapping it up. This is the Free Play Arcade Podcast. If you like it, click subscribe. If you have any questions for Ben, put them in the comments. Maybe we'll come back and answer some and kind of do a follow-up to clean things up. But otherwise, we're signing off. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back next time.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.